The giant crystal chamber on Nexus Prime had never seen so much fear. Ambassador Keth 9 stood at the center of the circular room, his tall blue body shaking as he spoke to the emergency assembly. His voice, usually calm and musical like all his people, now cracked with terror. 17 star systems are gone, he said, his forearms spreading wide to show the scale of the disaster. Not conquered, not occupied, gone. Every planet stripped bare, every city destroyed. Billions of our people dead. The representatives from across the galaxy listened in horrible silence. These were beings who had not known real war for 300 years. Their ships carried defensive weapons, their soldiers trained for peacekeeping, their entire civilization built on the idea that violence was a thing of the past. Admiral Zeph 4 stepped forward, his green skin pale with worry. The Centaurian had commanded the Federation's defense fleets for 50 years, and he had never lost a battle until now. The enemy calls itself the Void Swarm, he reported. They move like a single mind controlling millions of ships. Their technology adapts to our weapons faster than we can change tactics. He activated a holographic display that showed the last battle. Federation ships, beautiful and elegant with their curved hulls and shining armor, faced a dark cloud of twisted metal and organic matter. The swarm ships looked like they had grown rather than been built, all sharp edges and pulsing veins. Watch, Zeph 4 said quietly. The Federation fleet opened fire with their energy weapons, brilliant beams of pure light that could cut through asteroids. The first volley destroyed dozens of swarm ships, but within minutes, the remaining enemy vessels began to change. Their hulls shifted color and texture, becoming mirror bright to reflect the energy beams back at the Federation ships. They learn, the Admiral continued. Every weapon we use, every tactic we try, they counter within hours. And they keep coming. Always more ships, always more of them, like they breed in the darkness between stars. Counselor Vex 2, the oldest member of the assembly, slowly rose from his floating chair. The ancient being had lived through the last real war in the galaxy, back when species still fought each other instead of working together. His voice was barely a whisper, but every being in the chamber heard him. There is one option we have, not discussed, he said. One species we have deliberately avoided contact with. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant. The Deathworlders, someone whispered. The humans, Vex 2 confirmed. The reaction was immediate. Half the assembly began talking at once, their voices mixing into a chaos of different languages and emotions. Fear, disgust, curiosity, and desperate hope all blended together. Ambassador Keth 9 had to shout to restore order. The humans are quarantined for good reason. They are Class 9 aggressive predators from a death world. Our own studies classify them as too dangerous for normal diplomatic contact. Tell us again what makes them so dangerous, said Counselor Nira 5, her tentacles curling with nervous energy. Vex 2 activated another display. This one showed a blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. It looked beautiful from space, but the data readouts told a different story. Earth, he began, a high-gravity world where nearly everything is trying to kill everything else. The humans evolved not just as predators, but as persistence hunters. They would chase their prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. No other known species hunts this way. The display showed images that made several delegates look away. Humans running across vast distances, never stopping, never tiring, following wounded animals until they simply fell over dead. They domesticated their planets. Apex predators, Vex 2 continued. Creatures they call wolves and turned them into companions. They took the deadliest plants and animals and made them into food and medicine. Where other species learned to avoid danger, humans learned to master it. More images flashed by. Humans, riding massive beasts, humans swimming with creatures that could bite them in half. Humans climbing mountains that would kill most other species just from the thin air. But the truly terrifying part, Vex 2 said, is their approach to warfare. The new images were harder to watch. Vast battles involving millions of humans, weapons that could destroy entire cities, strategies that involved acceptable losses in the hundreds of thousands. They have fought each other continuously for their entire recorded history. Not border disputes or resource conflicts like civilized species. Total war. Complete destruction of enemy forces. They have developed over 15,000 different ways to kill members of their own species. A delegate from the peaceful Altarian collective stood up, his face green with sickness. This is exactly why we maintain the quarantine. These creatures are monsters. Monsters who might be our only hope. Vex 2 replied sadly. Admiral Zeph 4 pulled up another tactical display. Our computer models have run every scenario, every weapon system we possess, every defensive strategy we know. Against the Void Swarm, we have a projected survival rate of less than 12%. The swarm will consume the entire galaxy within 2 years. What about evacuation? Asked someone from the back of the chamber. To where? Zeph 4 spread his arms helplessly. This is the only galaxy we know. Our fastest ships would take 10,000 years to reach the next spiral arm, and we have no idea if it's even habitable. The chamber fell quiet again as the horrible truth sank in. They were facing extinction, and their peaceful civilization had no tools to fight back. Counselor Vex 2 spoke again. I have reviewed the classified files on human military doctrine. They practice something called combined arms warfare using multiple weapon types simultaneously. They employ adaptive tactics that change during battle. Most importantly, they view war not as a regrettable necessity, but as a science to be perfected. Their ships are primitive, protested Admiral Zeph 4. They barely have faster than light travel. Their ships are weapons, Vex 2 corrected. Every human vessel ever built is designed first for war and second for everything else. They armor their cargo ships. They put weapons on their exploration vessels. They cannot conceive of a spacecraft that is not ready for battle. Another urgent message arrived from the outer rim. A young communications officer ran into the chamber, her face white with terror. The Corvin Nebula defenses have fallen, she announced. The swarm has broken through. They're heading for the core worlds. The announcement hit the assembly like a physical blow. The Corvin Nebula was supposed to be impregnable, protected by the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy. If it had fallen, nowhere was safe. Ambassador Keth 9 looked around the chamber at the faces of his colleagues. These were the most intelligent beings in the galaxy, representatives of civilizations millions of years old. And they were helpless against an enemy that their peaceful nature could not comprehend. All in favor of sending a distress signal to Earth, he said quietly. The vote was close. Many delegates could not bring themselves to invite such dangerous creatures into their galaxy. But as another report arrived of 3 more systems going dark, fear won over caution. The motion passes, Keth 9 announced. May the ancestors forgive us for what we are about to unleash. The message was prepared, carefully, explaining the threat and requesting military assistance. It was transmitted using the Federation's most powerful communication array, aimed at the small yellow star system on the edge of known space. As the signal raced across the void at faster-than-light speeds, the assembled delegates could only wait and wonder if they had just called for salvation or doomed themselves to a different kind of extinction. On Earth, 3 days later, the signal would arrive at a small listening post on Luna. A human technician would stare at the translation in disbelief before reaching for the emergency communication system. The Deathworlders were about to learn that they were no longer alone in the universe, and the universe was about to learn what happened when you asked the children of Earth for help. The message arrived at Luna Station during the morning shift change. Technician Sam Torres was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee when every alarm in the communication center started screaming at once. The translation computer, which had been quietly listening to space static for 30 years, suddenly lit up with activity. Chief, you need to see this, Sam called out, his hands shaking as he read the display. Chief Warrant Officer Kate Phillips ran over from the duty desk. She had been monitoring deep space communications for 15 years and had never seen anything like this. The message was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, and definitely not human. Holy Mother of God, she whispered, reading the translation. Get me Admiral Sullivan on the secure line. Right now. 20 minutes later, Admiral Jake Sullivan stood in the command center of Luna Station, staring at the holographic display that showed the alien message. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and their new neighbors needed help. The alien who appeared in the recording was tall and blue, with 4 arms and eyes that looked like crystals. When he spoke, his voice was musical, but filled with terror. The universal translator struggled with some concepts, but the fear came through perfectly. "We are the Galactic Federation," the alien said. "We represent 47 species across 12,000 star systems. We face extinction from an enemy we cannot defeat. We have quarantined your species for 3 centuries because we believed you too dangerous for contact. Now we beg for your help." Admiral Sullivan was a 40-year veteran of the Solar Defense Navy. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt, commanded peacekeeping missions to Mars, and survived the Jupiter Station incident, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Get me the Joint Chiefs," he ordered. "Emergency session and wake up the President." 2 hours later, the most powerful military leaders on Earth sat around a conference table deep beneath the Pentagon. The alien message played 3 times before anyone spoke. General Lisa Martinez, commander of the Terran Marine Corps, was the first to break the silence. "So let me get this straight. These aliens have technology that makes our best ships look like toys. They can travel faster than light. They've colonized thousands of worlds, but they can't fight a war." Colonel Ben Rodriguez, head of military intelligence, pulled up the tactical data the aliens had included with their message. "Look at their ship designs," he said, highlighting the sleek, curved vessels. "They're beautiful, elegant, and completely impractical for combat. The alien warships looked more like works of art than military vessels. Their hulls were smooth and flowing, with large windows and graceful curves. They had defensive shields and energy weapons, but no armor, no redundant systems, no real protection for their crews. They built spaceships like we build passenger airliners," Admiral Sullivan observed. "Comfortable, efficient, and designed never to see real combat." General Martinez studied the enemy data. The Void Swarm ships were the opposite of Federation vessels. They looked like nightmares made real, all sharp edges and pulsing organic matter. But what really caught her attention was their tactics. "They fight like a hive mind," she said. "Perfect coordination, no individual initiative, but they adapt to threats. Every weapon the Federation uses, the swarm learns to counter." "Classic adaptive enemy," Colonel Rodriguez nodded. "Our doctrine has procedures for this. Hit them with everything at once. Don't give them time to learn." President Karen Hughes entered the room, still in her pajamas under a hastily thrown-on coat. The alien message played one more time while she listened with growing amazement. "How long do we have?" she asked. "According to their data, the galaxy has maybe 2 years before complete extinction," Admiral Sullivan replied. "These Federation people have been fighting a losing war for months. They're desperate." "What do we know about their technology?" the President asked. "Centuries ahead of us in some areas," Colonel Rodriguez answered. "They're faster than light travel, their energy weapons, their manufacturing capabilities. But they've never developed real military doctrine. They think of war as something regrettable, that should end as quickly as possible with minimal casualties." General Martinez laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Minimal casualties. Against an enemy that wants to eat your entire species." The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed the implications. Humanity was being asked to help civilizations that were vastly more advanced, but had forgotten how to fight for their lives. "What are our advantages?" President Hughes asked. Admiral Sullivan activated a display showing Earth's military capabilities. "We have something they don't understand. Military culture. For us, war isn't a regrettable necessity. It's a science. We study it, we prepare for it, we get better at it. Look at our ship designs," General Martinez added, showing images of human warships. Where alien vessels were elegant and curved, human ships were angular and brutal. Every surface bristled with weapons. Thick armor protected vital systems. Emergency bulkheads could seal off damaged sections. "We build our ships assuming they're going to get shot at," Colonel Rodriguez explained. "Multiple redundant systems, armored crew compartments, self-repair capabilities. Our cargo ships have more defensive systems than their battleships. President Hughes studied the data. What about their request for help? Can we actually make a difference? Ma'am, if half of what they're telling us is true, we can revolutionize their entire approach to warfare, Admiral Sullivan said. They're fighting with rules. The enemy isn't. Explain. General Martinez pulled up the Federation's rules of engagement. They have protocols for minimizing civilian casualties, for protecting enemy non-combatants, for avoiding damage to infrastructure. They're trying to fight a clean war against an enemy that doesn't recognize any rules at all. And our approach would be different? Total war, Colonel Rodriguez said simply. You identify the threat, you locate its source, and you destroy it completely. No half measures, no rules except winning. The president was quiet for a long moment. The implications were staggering. Humanity was about to make contact with a galactic civilization, but under circumstances that would define the relationship forever. What do they know about us, she asked. Everything and nothing, Admiral Sullivan replied. They've been watching us for 300 years. They know we're violent, that we fight each other constantly, that we've developed thousands of ways to kill. What they don't know is why. They see the violence but not the purpose, General Martinez added. They don't understand that we fight to protect what we love, that our aggression comes from our need to defend our families, our homes, our species. Colonel Rodriguez activated another display. They classify us as Class 9 aggressive predators from a death world. They're terrified of us, but they're more terrified of extinction. President Hughes made her decision. We help them, but we do this carefully. We show them enough to win the war, but not enough to make them regret asking for our help. What kind of force are we talking about? Admiral Sullivan asked. Small but effective. Our best ships, our most experienced crews. We show them what human military doctrine can accomplish, but we don't reveal the full extent of our capabilities. General Martinez nodded. The 1st Expeditionary Fleet. 30 ships, hand-picked crews, our most advanced weapon systems. Timeline? The President asked. 48 hours to assemble the fleet, Admiral Sullivan replied. The aliens provided navigation data for faster-than-light travel. We can be in their space within a week. And command? Captain Dan Clark, Admiral Sullivan said without hesitation. 20 years experience veteran of the Belt Wars knows how to adapt tactics on the fly. If anyone can show these aliens how humans fight, it's him. The President stood up. Make it happen, and gentlemen, lady, remember, we're not just representing Earth anymore. We're representing the entire human species to a galaxy that has spent 3 centuries being afraid of us. As the meeting broke up, each officer had the same thought. Humanity was about to step onto a galactic stage, but not as explorers or diplomats. They were coming as warriors, invited by desperate aliens who had no idea what they were unleashing. In shipyards across the solar system, crews began working around the clock to prepare Earth's finest warships for their first interstellar mission. The Void Swarm had no idea that the galaxy's most feared predators were mobilizing against them. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zerion system and immediately knew they were too late. 3 Federation colonies burned in the distance while massive swarms of dark ships moved between them like hungry insects. The battle was already over. The Federation had lost. Captain Dan Clark stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the massacre through the main view screen. His ship was the pride of Earth's Navy, a heavy cruiser built for war. Around him, 29 other human vessels formed a perfect attack formation, their angular hulls bristling with weapons. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Federation flagship, reported Lieutenant Amy Chen from the communications station. Admiral Keth 9 is requesting immediate assistance. Put him through, Clark ordered. The blue alien appeared on the screen, his crystalline features showing exhaustion and defeat. Behind him, his bridge crew worked frantically at elegant control panels that looked more like art displays than military equipment. Captain Clark, thank the ancestors you've arrived, Keith 9 said, his musical voice strained with desperation. We have been fighting for 18 hours. Our shields are failing. We must retreat before we lose more ships. Clark studied the tactical display. The Federation fleet consisted of 12 vessels, each one beautiful and graceful. They moved, in perfect formation, their energy weapons creating brilliant light shows against the dark swarms of enemy ships, but they were clearly losing. "Admiral, I need you to explain your engagement protocols," Clark said. "What rules are you fighting under?" The question seemed to confuse Keth 9. "Rules? We follow standard Federation military doctrine. Minimum, necessary force, protection of non-combatant populations, preservation of infrastructure where possible." "Non-combatants?" Clark asked. "In those swarm ships?" "The larger vessels contain breeding chambers with larval forms," Keth 9 explained. "They are not active combatants according to our legal definitions." Behind Clark, his tactical officer muttered something unprintable under his breath. The humans exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their opinion of fighting a war with lawyers making the rules. "Admiral, I need you to move your fleet to a safe distance," Clark said. "We're going to show you how humans fight. But Captain, our tactical computers indicate the swarm force is too large for your small fleet to engage. You have only 30 ships against over 200 enemy vessels." Clark smiled, and something in that expression made Keth 9 step back from his screen. "Admiral, we're not here to fight fair, we're here to win." The human fleet began to move, and immediately the Federation observers noticed something different. Where their own ships moved in orderly formations, the human vessels spread out in what looked like chaos. Some ships accelerated toward the swarm, others moved toward the asteroid belt, and a few simply disappeared from sensors entirely. "What are they doing?" asked Commander Zara 3, Keth 9's second-in-command. "Their formation makes no tactical sense." On the Retribution's bridge, Lieutenant Chen worked her controls with practiced efficiency. "Stealth destroyers are in position," she reported. "Electronic warfare drones deployed. Kinetic bombardment platforms ready." Clark nodded. "Begin phase." 1. What happened next redefined warfare for every species watching. The human attack began not with weapons but with deception. False sensor readings flooded the space around the swarm. Decoy ships appeared on enemy sensors while real vessels vanished. The swarm, accustomed to fighting predictable Federation tactics, suddenly found itself unable to determine what was real. The first human weapons to fire were not energy beams or missiles, but simple chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds. Mass drivers, the humans called them. Railguns that could launch projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. The swarm ships, adapted to defend against Federation energy weapons, had no defense against raw kinetic force. The metal slugs punched through their hulls like paper, each impact releasing energy equivalent to a nuclear explosion. But the real shock came when the swarm tried to adapt. Their hulls began to shift and change, developing new armor configurations to stop kinetic weapons. Within minutes, they had created defenses that could deflect the human projectiles. "Adaptation complete," reported a Federation sensor operator. "The enemy has countered their primary weapon system." Then the humans opened fire with everything else. Particle beams, fusion torpedoes, chemical explosives, and weapons the Federation had no names for struck the swarm simultaneously. Every human ship carried different weapon systems. When the swarm adapted to stop one type of attack, 3 others were already hitting them. "Impossible," whispered Commander Zara 3. "No species fights with such diverse weapon systems. The logistics alone would be a nightmare." On the human side, the attack was proceeding exactly as planned. Captain Clark watched his tactical display with satisfaction as the swarm formation began to collapse under the coordinated assault. "They're trying to adapt to our particle beams," reported Lieutenant Chen. "Hull composition changing on the larger vessels." "Switch to cluster munitions," Clark ordered. "Hit them with the chemical explosives while they're reconfiguring." The Federation observers watched in amazement as human tactics shifted in real time. Every weapon system had a counterweapon ready. Every defensive adaptation by the swarm was met with a new type of attack. The humans fought like they had planned for this exact scenario. "How is this possible?" Keth 9 asked his tactical officer. "Our computers show that coordinating so many different weapon types should be impossible." "Sir, I think they've been fighting wars like this for their entire history," the officer replied. Look at their ship designs. Every vessel is built to carry multiple weapon systems. They expect to fight adaptive enemies. The battle raged for 2 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The swarm, accustomed to learning and adapting to enemy tactics, found itself facing opponents who changed their tactics faster than adaptation was possible. Every time the swarm's hive mind found a solution to one threat, the humans had already moved on to something else. The turning point came when the human fleet used the asteroid belt as ammunition. Mass drivers accelerated chunks of rock to devastating speeds, while mining charges planted by stealth teams turned asteroids into fragmentation bombs. The swarm found itself caught in a killing field where every piece of debris was a potential weapon. By the ancestors, breathed Keth 9. They've turned the entire system into a battlefield. The final phase of the battle was almost anticlimactic. With their numbers reduced and their adaptation abilities overwhelmed, the remaining swarm ships tried to retreat. The humans didn't let them. Long-range missiles and energy weapons picked off fleeing vessels one by one, ensuring that no enemy ship escaped to report human tactics to the larger swarm. When the last swarm vessel was destroyed, the Zerion system fell silent except for the quiet hum of human engines. 3 Federation colonies had been saved, and not a single human ship had been lost. Captain Clark opened communications with the Federation flagship. Admiral Keth 9, the system is secure. We're beginning search and rescue operations for survivors. The 2 Blue alien stared at him with something approaching awe. Captain, in 18 hours of fighting, we destroyed perhaps 20 enemy vessels while losing 4 of our own ships. In 2 hours, you eliminated over 200 swarm ships without a single loss. Different approaches to warfare, Clark said simply. We can discuss tactical doctrine later. Right now, we need to help the survivors. As rescue operations began, word of the battle spread through Federation space at light speed. For the first time since the swarm invasion began, the Federation had won a complete victory. But the cost of that victory was the realization that their peaceful civilization had invited something into their galaxy that might be more dangerous than the enemy they faced. The humans had come to help, and they were very, very good at what they did. News of the Zerion victory traveled across the galaxy faster than the ships that had won it. For the first time in months, Federation worlds celebrated instead of mourning. Captain Dan Clark found himself promoted to Admiral and given command of a joint Human Federation task force that grew larger every day as more species volunteered their ships. But the celebration was mixed with fear. Intelligence reports from the battle were analyzed by every major species in the galaxy, and the conclusions were uniformly disturbing. The humans had not just defeated the swarm, they had made it look easy. Admiral Clark stood in the command center of the newly designated flagship UES Vengeance, studying holographic displays that showed swarm movements across a dozen star systems. The enemy was regrouping, adapting their tactics based on what they had learned from the Zerion defeat. But Clark was planning something the swarm would never expect. Admiral, the Federation commanders are requesting another strategy meeting, reported Commander Troy Barnes, Clark's executive officer. They're still uncomfortable with our operational methods. Clark nodded grimly. The cultural clash between human and Federation military doctrine had only gotten worse as the joint fleet grew. Federation officers, trained in consensus building and careful planning, struggled to understand human military hierarchy and decision-making speed. The meeting took place in the Vengeance's main briefing room. Around the table sat representatives from 12 different species, each one trying to understand how the humans planned to fight the war. Admiral Keth 9 had become the unofficial spokesman for the Federation forces, his experience at Zerion giving him credibility with both sides. Admiral Clark, began Commander Nira 5 of the Altarian Defense Corps, her tentacles curling with nervous energy. Your proposed offensive against the Vega Proxima system violates 17 different Federation warfare conventions. The civilian population may already be absorbed into the swarm biomass, but they are still technically non-combatants. Clark looked around the table at faces that showed confusion, fear, and disapproval. These beings had spent centuries learning to fight wars without really fighting them. The concept of total warfare was as alien to them as their peaceful nature was to humans. "Commander, let me explain how humans view this situation," Clark said, activating a tactical display. "The swarm has turned the Vega Proxima system into a breeding ground. Every day we delay, they produce thousands more ships and millions more warriors. From our perspective, leaving that system operational is the same as handing them the weapons to destroy more Federation worlds." "But the scale of destruction you're proposing," protested Captain Zara 8 of the Centaurian fleet. "You want to collapse the system star. The explosion will sterilize everything within 3 light years." "Exactly," Clark replied without emotion. "Complete elimination of the threat." The Federation officers exchanged horrified glances. The idea of deliberately destroying a star system was beyond their comprehension. It was not just warfare. It was cosmic vandalism, on a scale that violated everything they believed about civilized conflict. Colonel Maria Santos, one of the human Marines, assigned to train Federation forces, spoke from the back of the room. "Respectfully, sirs, you're thinking like peacekeepers trying to restore order. We're thinking like exterminators trying to eliminate a plague." "The Federation does not practice extermination," Admiral Keth 9 said firmly. "We believe in rehabilitation, in finding peaceful solutions even with hostile species." "And how has that worked out against the swarm?" asked Commander Barnes. The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Every being in the room knew the answer. The Federation's peaceful approach had cost them 17 star systems and billions of lives. Clark activated another display, showing the broader strategic situation. "The swarm is not a species in the way you understand the term. It's a biological weapon that consumes everything in its path. You cannot negotiate with a virus. You cannot rehabilitate a cancer. You can only destroy it completely." Over the following weeks, the Joint Fleet began its systematic campaign against swarm holdings. The humans implemented what they called total war doctrine, and the Federation learned to their horror what that really meant. At the Tau Ceti system, human engineers turned Federation ships into mobile weapons platforms. Elegant vessels designed for exploration and diplomacy were retrofitted with armor plating and multiple weapon systems. The transformation horrified their original crews, who watched their beautiful ships become ugly instruments of war. "My ship was built to carry diplomatic envoys and cultural exchanges," complained Captain Voss II, as human technicians welded missile launchers to his vessel's hull. "Now it looks like a military transport." "Now it can survive combat," replied Chief Engineer Alex Rodriguez matter-of-factly. "Pretty ships don't win wars." The cultural training was even more difficult. Human Marines taught Federation security forces what they called aggressive boarding techniques, which violated numerous Federation regulations about treatment of enemy personnel. "You're teaching us to be killers," protested Lieutenant Kara 6. During a training session, Sergeant First Class Jenny Walsh looked at the young alien with something approaching pity. "No, ma'am, we're teaching you to be survivors. The swarm won't hesitate to kill you. Your choice is to kill them first or watch your people die." The real shock came when the fleet reached the Vega Proxima system. The swarm had been busy during the months since Xerion, turning 3 planets into massive breeding complexes. Organic structures covered entire continents, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. Admiral Clark's battle plan was presented to the Federation commanders with typical human directness. "We're going to destabilize the star using coordinated mass driver bombardment. The resulting nova will sterilize the entire system." "You're talking about genocide on a stellar scale," whispered Admiral Keth 9. "I'm talking about stopping a threat that will consume the galaxy if we let it spread," Clark replied. "The swarm has already killed the original population of these worlds. What's growing down there isn't sentient life. It's a weapons factory." The Federation commanders requested time to consider the proposal. The humans gave them 6 hours before proceeding with or without Federation approval. In the end, desperation won over principle. The Joint Fleet implemented Clark's plan, and for the first time in galactic history, a sentient species deliberately triggered a stellar collapse. The Nova was visible from 3 sectors away. The explosion destroyed not only the swarm breeding complexes, but created a firebreak that stopped swarm expansion across an entire spiral arm. The psychological impact was enormous on both sides. The swarm, for the first time in its existence, encountered an enemy willing to destroy star systems rather than lose them. The concept was so foreign to their hive mind that they began making tactical errors, trying to understand opponents whose strategies made no logical sense. The Federation realized they had allied themselves with a species that operated on a scale of warfare they had never imagined. Human willingness to accept massive destruction in pursuit of strategic objectives violated every principle of civilized conflict. Admiral Clark, said Keth 9 after the Vega Proxima operation, "My people are beginning to wonder if we have traded one threat for another." Clark looked at the alien commander with the patient expression of someone explaining a simple concept to a child. "Admiral, we came here to save your civilization. The methods we use to do that are up to us. You asked for our help because your methods weren't working." "But at what cost?" Keth 9 pressed. "You've changed the fundamental nature of warfare in this galaxy. How do we go back to civilized conflict after this?" "You don't," Clark said simply. "The galaxy has learned that there are threats that require total response, that knowledge doesn't disappear when the current war ends." As reports of the Nova reached Federation worlds, the reaction was mixed. Relief that the swarm advance had been stopped was tempered by horror at the methods used. The humans had saved them, but at the cost of innocence that could never be recovered. The war was turning in the Federation's favor, but the victory was changing them into something they no longer recognized. 6 months after the first human ship had arrived in Federation space, the war was over. The Void Swarm had been driven back to the edge of the galaxy and systematically destroyed. The last hive ship died in the cold darkness between stars, its biological systems finally overwhelmed by coordinated human attacks that gave it no time to adapt. The victory celebration on New Geneva, the Federation capital world, was the largest gathering in galactic history. Representatives from 47 species filled the massive crystal amphitheater, their voices creating a symphony of different languages all expressing the same emotion: relief. Admiral Dan Clark stood at the speaker's platform, wearing his dress uniform and looking uncomfortable with all the attention. Behind him sat President Karen Hughes, who had traveled from Earth for the treaty negotiations that would define humanity's place in galactic civilization. "6 months ago you asked us for help," Clark said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "Today the threat is gone. The galaxy is safe. We kept our promise." The applause was thunderous, but Clark noticed it was not universal. Some delegations clapped politely while others remained silent. The victory had come at a cost that went beyond ships and lives. The galaxy had been changed forever, and not everyone was happy about it. Ambassador Helen Foster, Earth's new representative to the Federation, watched the ceremony with mixed feelings. The woman had been a diplomat for 20 years, specializing in difficult negotiations, but nothing had prepared her for the challenge of integrating humanity into a civilization that was simultaneously grateful for their help and terrified of their methods. After the speeches ended, the real work began. The post-war negotiations took place in smaller rooms where diplomats and military leaders could speak more freely. The discussions revealed just how much the war had changed everyone involved. The Federation's military doctrine will require fundamental revision, reported General Vex II, who had become the architect of post-war military planning. Human tactical innovations have proven so effective that we cannot return to our previous methods. "What kind of changes are we talking about?" asked Counselor Nera 5. "Everything," Vex II replied bluntly. "Ship design, weapon systems, training protocols, command structure. The humans have shown us that our entire approach to defense was inadequate." Ambassador Foster leaned forward. "Earth is prepared to share our military knowledge through joint training programs and technology exchanges. We believe cooperative defense benefits everyone." The offer was met with mixed reactions. Species like the Viridian Collective, whose homeworld had been saved by human intervention, supported closer military cooperation. Ambassador Keth 9, now bearing scars from his service aboard human ships, had become one of the strongest advocates for military reform. "I have seen human warriors in battle," Keth 9 told the assembly. "They fight not from hatred or aggression but from love. Love of their families, their homes, their species. This is why they are so effective. They understand what they are protecting." But other species remained deeply concerned about humanity's long-term intentions. The Zeronian Empire, known for their isolationist policies, voiced what many were thinking, but few dared say. "The humans saved us from the swarm," said Senator Zara Prime. "But who will save us from the humans?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Everyone in the room knew that Earth's rapid adoption of alien technology had accelerated human military development by centuries. The species that had been quarantined as too dangerous for contact was now the galaxy's dominant military power. President Hughes stood to address the concern directly. "Senator, I understand your fears. Humanity has a violent history, but that violence has always been directed at protecting what we value. We value our new place in galactic civilization. And if that changes," pressed the Zeronian representative, "then you will deal with it the same way you dealt with the swarm," Hughes replied calmly. "By working together, sharing information, and maintaining the strength to defend yourselves." The negotiations continued for weeks, covering everything, from trade agreements to military cooperation to technology sharing. The final treaty was a complex document that tried to balance humanity's new role as galactic protector with the Federation's need for security from their protectors. Earth would establish military academies throughout Federation space, training alien forces in human tactical doctrine. In return, alien species would share their advanced technologies with human researchers. Most importantly, a joint command structure would oversee galactic defense, ensuring that no single species controlled the military forces that protected them all. The signing ceremony was smaller than the victory celebration but more significant. As President Hughes put her signature on the treaty, she was aware that she was committing humanity to a role they had never asked for, but could not avoid. "With this treaty," she said, "humanity accepts the responsibility of helping to protect galactic civilization. We do not take this lightly." But the real changes were already visible across the galaxy. On Federation worlds, construction crews worked around the clock to build military installations designed with human input. Elegant cities that had never known war now bristled with defensive systems. Space stations that had served as trading posts were converted into military bases. Captain Danny Walsh, Clark's replacement as commander of the Human Patrol Fleet, reviewed intelligence reports from his office aboard the UES Guardian. The data showed a galaxy in transition, as peaceful species struggled to adapt to the reality that their long period of enforced peace was over. "Sir, we're receiving reports of increased military spending on 17 Federation worlds," reported his intelligence officer. "Several species are developing weapons programs based on our tactical data." Walsh nodded. It was exactly what Earth strategists had predicted. The galaxy had learned that there were threats requiring total response, and that knowledge was spreading beyond the immediate war. The Federation was militarizing, whether they admitted it or not. "Any signs of new external threats?" Walsh asked. "Deep space monitoring stations have detected anomalous signals from beyond the galactic rim," the officer replied. "Could be nothing, but the pattern analysis suggests artificial origin." Walsh studied the data with growing concern. The galaxy was preparing for war just as new threats might be emerging from the darkness between galaxies. Humanity had saved one civilization, but their success had created new challenges. On Earth itself, the changes were equally dramatic. The blue and green world that had once been quarantined as too dangerous for contact was now the unofficial military headquarters of galactic civilization. Orbital shipyards worked constantly to build vessels for the expanding defense fleet. Alien visitors came daily to study human military doctrine and technology. The planet's surface showed the new reality as well. What had once been a relatively isolated world was now a fortress, preparing for threats that might come from anywhere in the universe. Defense satellites ringed the planet. Underground bunkers could shelter the entire population. Most telling of all, human children learned basic military skills alongside traditional subjects, preparing for a future where Earth would always be a target. President Hughes stood in her office, looking out at the night sky through reinforced windows. The stars no longer seemed distant and peaceful. They were full of neighbors who needed protection, potential threats that required watching, and unknowns that demanded constant vigilance. "Madam President," her aide announced, "the Federation Council is requesting another meeting about the deep space signals." Hughes nodded. The galaxy was safe from the void swarm, but safety was not the same as peace. Humanity had answered one SOS call, and in doing so had committed themselves to answering all future calls. The Deathworlders had come to stay, and the universe would never be the same. In the depths of space, human patrol ships pushed further into the unknown, carrying with them the hard-learned lesson that sometimes, to preserve peace, you must always be prepared for war. The galaxy had its guardians now. Whether that was salvation or simply a different kind of threat remained to be seen.